Matt.
Hey everybody, the panel's now started. You're free to chat in the background if you want. Just heads up. That's my New York taxi cab whistle. So only get one of those. My years at East Village. All right, you might get two. We'll see. I hate to be the school teacher.
Yeah, but it'll help.
Did it work?
No,
there we go. Right, East Village. I can still get a taxi. All right. So
he's got a ruler he got from a nun. Y'all going to get
watch out. Joe went to Catholic school, so he's well prepared for either taking the beatings or getting them.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. So I'm Matt, and welcome to Pacific Coast Gallery.
Yay!
I'm going to ask very few questions and let these fine folks do most of the talking. They all have pretty amazing life experiences, so we'll do the panel for 30, 60 minutes, however long it goes. Then we'll have time for Q&A afterwards. So as you guys have questions, save them up, and at the end we'll go around. Following that, there's a movie, so we're doing a screening of Jazz v Punk Hermosa Beach, which is a documentary that aired initially at the Sunscreen, is that right? Sunscreen Film Festival about a month ago, and we're screening it again tonight after the panel's over. Probably, if you guys all want, whoever's over here, I would say shift this way. Sorry. You guys can hear okay?
Yeah.
As Mike Watt said, everybody swing to the right.
Yeah.
There we go. Huh?
Yeah. It's too close to elections to say that.
Yeah, he was referring to Ronald Reagan, unfortunately, but anyway. We'll have the movie after that. That'll be 9:30 or 10. That's downstairs, so if you guys want to see the film, it will be in our lower garage. So when this ends about 10, you'll go down 2 flights of stairs. That'll be there.
Cool.
And then we also...
The audience went wild when this movie was screening. They were yelling. It's a great movie to watch.
Incredible. Super cool. It's about 30, 40 minutes long. It features a lot of these folks, actually, are in the movie, as well as many others. So, and then if you are interested in buying books, we have Spot's book here. We have Joe has written 3 books here. So those are all at the front table when you're way in or out. If you guys want to get a book, obviously all of Spot's photos, which is really why we're here, to celebrate all Spot's photos, are up on the wall. And if you're interested in buying any of them, you can also talk to fine young ladies, also known as my wife and daughters, at the front. So there you go. I think they're very fun. So, I thought we would start with, rather than me introducing you guys, everyone kind of giving just the quick version of kind of who you are and what you do, and kind of when and how you first got to the South Bay, and what you thought about it when you first arrived.
My name is Randy Nauert, and I'm a 5th generation Californian. My dad grew up in the Surfridge Estates, which is now all those vacant lots where the airport took the property in Playa del Rey. And I surfed here. We threw concerts at the Biltmore Hotel before my band and the Beach Boys had record contracts. And our band, the Bel Airs, released Mr. Moto, and then we split and became the Challengers and released an album called Surf Beat, which sold about 200,000 copies in the first 2 months, and launched the genre which we now call surf music. And that was 60 to 67. We made 28 albums under various names. I did the Wipeout album for the Safaris, and we had the Challengers, the Defenders, the Good Guys. We ran out of names, so we recorded as the Cliches. And had big hits in Japan with, like, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. was like #1 for 10 weeks. So then we, as the Cliches, so then our other label released the Challengers version of The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and it was in the top 10 for months too. Same guys, but a lot of us in the band went on to do other things, like one of our guitar players, Larry Carlton, you might know him. If you hear Joni Mitchell singing, "Help Me, I Think I'm Falling," he's the guitar player on that, with Steely Dan and Kid Charlemagne and that stuff. And a lot of us went in different music stuff. I went off to, we recorded at World Pacific Jazz Studios, and the owner of the label gave me the first Ravi Shankar album, and 5 years later, Ravi had invited me, and after I met him in '62, and 5 years later I showed up in Bombay, And I said, well, here I am. And he goes, oh, you are? Yeah, I'm sure you are. But it happened to be at the same time that George Harrison was there, spending 6 weeks, and we took sitar lessons together and stayed friends. And when I came back from India, I went to work for MGM and United Artists and 20th Century Fox and did music publishing and scoring, and worked on a film called Zabriskie Point and Goodbye Mr. Chips and a bunch of other stuff, helped break James Taylor. And then I worked for Albert Grossman, running an office out here, which was Bob Dylan and Janis Joplin, the band, and Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Paul Butter, a lot of. And I handled Bob Dylan's publishing for the Blonde on Blonde album, John Wesley Harding and the Basement Tapes. In the process of that, gave Jimi Hendrix All Along the Watchtower. But all of it comes back down here to Hermosa and public school.
Pier Avenue.
And I was in the Hermosa Beach marching band. And our band and leader was Chico Hamilton, who was a regular at the Lighthouse here and did a lot of great records afterwards. But you know, you're playing at the Lighthouse for 35 people 6 nights a week, you know, in those days in the 50s, and you had to do something else. So Chico was the band coach. I'm all into the free music lessons in schools. I think that's a wonderful thing. And anyway, I still do that. I work with a German band called the Scorpions. I work with the Doobie Brothers and have a record label. And if you watch PBS, there's a series called Lost LA. And this is season 3, and episode 3, which aired last week for the first time, is called Beach Culture. And I'm in that one, and we worked on that. But it really focuses on what we are here. So it's online now. You can watch that, Beach Culture on Lost LA. Just Google that. Have some fun. I interviewed Bruce Brown and gave a lot of music to a lot of the great surf filmmakers. And Bruce Brown, who did Endless Summer and On Any Sunday, he did our first 2 album covers, and we stayed friends forever. And so anyway, it's enough of that, huh?
Well, you went from Jimi Hendrix to the Beatles to the Endless Summer and everything in between, so.
And,
It's not bad. It's not bad.
and the Hermosa Beach Marching Band.
I would hate to have to follow that, but Spot, you get to follow that. So,
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sorry about that. Talk about when you hung out with Jimi Hendrix. Yeah.
These are his photos.
Go Cubs!
Well, I never hung out with Jimi Hendrix, but I did hang out and work with the 8-track recorder that recorded his first 2 albums down the street at Media Art when that was going on.
That's cool.
But other than that, I mean, I feel like I keep my mouth shut. Randy's got so many stories to tell, and you know, I mean, they're interesting. We, I guess about a month ago, I had started tracking down some of the mastering engineers, guys who produced, mastered a lot of the records that I did with SST, which JOE CARDUCCI will tell you about in a minute. And because you know all of those records had to be put out on vinyl, so interviewed John Golden, who worked at K-Disc, and then let me see, Kevin Gray, who worked out in Burbank. He's another guy who helped save our asses on bad mastering and that. And then you know Randy drove out to Malibu. We had a talk for about 3 hours, and you know he's got a lot more to say. But me, I was you know, I grew up in LA and wanted to be a musician more than anything, and then somehow this photography thing kind of knocked me off of that direct path, and I took the other path, you know, kind of like a blocked artery or something says, oh, let's send the blood someplace else, and that wasn't working. This is like, you know, early mid-70s Hollywood, and whenever, you know, when the glam thing started coming in, I didn't fit into glam. You know, I liked you know, Link Ray and well a whole lot of things. Part of it was a lot of jazz, and surf music was a big thing for me when I was growing up. But I got out of Hollywood at one point when things just weren't going good, and ended up here in Hermosa, homeless. I had like just enough gas in the tank of my old Toyota, and drove over here and says, well, I'll go down and see what happens. I had $5 in my pocket, went out on the Strand, opened up the guitar case and played a little bit and made enough money to buy some tacos from Taco Bill's.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, met some people. Said, "Oh, well, come on, sit on. We'll let you sleep on our couch tonight." You know, I said, "Okay, well, this." Met some guys who were building a recording studio, and I said, "Well, can I take a look at your place?" Walked up the stairs one day, and I immediately knew what was there, and told them, "Well, let me help you build it, because I want to use it. I wanted to record my own music." And so they said, "Yeah," and I kind of became the early engineer. Swept a lot of floors, cleaned a lot of toilets up there, and you know, soldered a whole lot of wires, and you know, cut wood, drove nails, screws, whatever, and that's how that happened. And the first 8-track recorder they had was the one they got from Paramount that did what was the first? Are You Experienced and Access Bold as Love?
And you're talking about Media Art Studios.
Media Art, yeah, right down here at 111 Pier, up top, right there in the corner of Pier and Hermosa.
It's above Rock Sushi today.
Yeah. So that's kind of like how I started here in Hermosa, and then just, you know, a camera got stolen, and I got another one finally after Easy Reader, yes, Easy Reader, hired me to do music reviews, which is a whole other story. And then all of this stuff kind of happened out of all of that stuff, and I'm going to leave it at that.
Great photos.
Take it away, Joe.
Which one? We don't know which are yours.
Which ones are? Oh, well, all of the ones behind you there are mine. All the ones behind us here are mine. These are Matt's from the gallery. He has to leave these up.
Dog pooping is mine.
Yes.
Everything else is mine. Basically.
And this is your bartender out on the patio.
And this is Sarah. Yeah, so if you get poured a beer by Sarah Foley, there you have it. We got her in mid-stride.
You look great in red shorts.
Back in 2011. Yeah.
She'll like that.
Yeah. And if you ask her what she was running from, she will tell you.
Her mom.
As far as the beach and surf music, I mean, I grew up surrounded by cornfields in Illinois. But in '65, I was wearing, what's your name? I was wearing,
Joe.
Yeah.
Joe
Joe Carducci.
I was wearing surfer shirts until the nuns said, "Mr. Carducci, that's not a real collar." And then I had to wear collar shirts again. The skateboards had steel wheels. That was a little too scary and dangerous. So I came out west in '76 and was in Hollywood for a year. And that was pretty scary too. It was cheap living, but I moved to Portland and got into the record business, independent distribution, and wrote for the Black Flag Nervous Breakdown single in '79 when I saw a Slash magazine advertisement for it. We would write for a sample and then buy based on how good it was. We moved to Berkeley and the record didn't reach us immediately. Later that year, I saw Black Flag and Dez, your son, was singing in those years, and it was worth it. They were the best band, and I saw them at kind of the lowest rent dormitory off the University of Berkeley campus. Flipper opened for them, and it was very low ceiling, very low stage. I mean, it was hard to see over the bodies. It was like everyone was radiant, and it was a sweatbox. It was an amazing show. And because Black Flag began to tour, first up and down the West Coast and later around the country, we were selling their records really well, and they were sort of taken over for the stuff we had been known for, which was English imports like Joy Division or Young Marble Giants and whatnot. and stuff like the Avengers and DOA, and again, Black Flag toured. And so when I saw them in Chicago in summer '81, Dez was still singing, but they were bringing Henry Rollins back to LA to take over vocals and finish the Damaged album. And I went up to Greg and said, if you guys need someone to run your office while you're touring, I'm interested in coming back to LA. And the police had just run them out of Torrance. So he said, well, we don't have an office. And I said, well, you know, that sounds good. And when I got down, they were behind Unicorn in West Hollywood, finishing up the Damaged album. And West Hollywood was, you know, we were right by the Tropicana, and so there were rock and rollers in the cafe, Duke's, and random people would ask you, are you Jack Nicholson? Because people are looking for stars.
Right. Yes, I am.
Out of all of this, it seemed to me to be pretty grimy Hollywood. There'd be tourists wandering around like they were in Oz. And eventually the band split with the Unicorn label and moved back down to Redondo Beach, where they had a storage room. So we made that SST up in North Redondo on near Artesia. And but then that's when I felt like I was where Black Flag came from. You know, we could walk to the beach, we could, it was cooler, you know, you could sense not just the freedom, but the, just, it was nicer. The air was cleaner, the sun was out, and then I felt like, oh, this is, you know, I was studying Los Angeles and comparing it to Chicago, which is really where I came from. And I knew that city, and they're so different. And I'm still studying it. You know, I walked down the Strand to Redondo to see if Concerts by the Sea was still there. I guess it's not. Don't know, but and this is Dez's mother. And we'll throw it to you now.
Okay. My name is Gloria Cadena. My husband was Ozzie Cadena. And we, one day, I come from the East Coast. He said, we're going to move. And I thought to the next town in New Jersey. I said, okay, I'm ready. He said, no, California. I said, what? And I don't know if I could live back east anymore. But, and then we came, and he said, no, I'm going to be booking the Lighthouse. And so I was always in the background, calling the musicians and looking them up and doing that, and made everybody think that he was doing it, which was okay. But, and I'm still booking the Lighthouse 3 times a week.
Thank you, Gloria.
And I'll continue to do it as long as I can. I'm looking at a 94-year-old lady.
And what was your impression? What was your impression of Hermosa Beach when you first got here? I mean, it's quite different from life in New Jersey,
It's
obviously.
quite different, yeah.
What did you think?
I liked it, you know. You had the beach and you had the lighthouse, and it was really, really great. And like I say, I don't know if I could live back east anymore. You know, I've been here too long anyway. But, and I just feel this is my home now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Next.
Well, and we've done the circle, so we may do this kind of chronologically, and then we'll start meandering. But Randy, I think you kind of grew up here. You were here in the,
Yeah.
you know, I won't say when you were born, but you were
1945.
1945. So you had
The year of the atomic bomb.
really well. There you have it. But you had a childhood. You're fifth generation California. Childhood in the South Bay. I mean, we chatted the other day, and you know, your life story is amazing. But you know, I think it started with beyond the music. You have stories about being an early surfer. You told me your first skateboard was a 2x4, I think, with roller skates, metal roller skates. I would just love for you to kind of take us back to, you know, we'll start at the 50s and then we'll work our way back up to SST Records. But maybe, you know, you can help us understand life in the South Bay, you know, music, surfing, skating, the whole thing.
Well, my dad graduated from Manual Arts High School, which was, and then Grandpa moved out to the Surf Ridge Estates, and that's where Dad got into the 32 Olympics as a springboard diver. So we're always kind of a water family. His freshman roommate at UCLA was Lloyd Bridges. So on Facebook, I've been posting these pictures of Dad and Lloyd, and then Jeff and Bo are my sisters and my age. And so Dad used to do stunts on Hollywood movies because he was a good diver. And he would do the pirate fights, and he would fall off the mast without dying. And one of his mates was a lifeguard at the LA Athletic Club, and that was Duke Hanamonko.
Wow.
And Duke gave him the nickname because my dad really would fight with him. And because when I first met Duke, he said, "Oh, you're Tuffy Nort's son." And then he started telling me stories. So I was very fortunate to watch all that happen and watch the aerospace industry develop and foam board. Well, I started on one of those old kook boxes, a paddle board and a redwood and pine boards, and then all of a sudden the balsa boards came out, and they could use balsa wood with fiberglass. It was invented in England with resin for airplanes, and people out here adapted and made the first balsa boards. My first was a Hobie balsa, and then about 1959. Hobie came out with a foam board, and one of my friends got one, and I tried it, and it paddled easier, and it caught waves faster, and I thought, it's over. Anybody can have a plastic surfboard now. Before people had to like you to borrow their board, and they'd leave them on the beach all day long. And actually our band started playing for the Hermosa group of guys called the Palos Verdes Surfing Club. And they would pay us $300 to play for their dances, 3 45-minute sets, and that Surf Beat album is one set of dance tunes that they like to do dancing. So I kind of watched that foam board thing and all of that develop, and just the culture just spread. Like the Beach Boys really wanted to be the Four Preps, and they were local guys, but they were writing songs, and you just had to write about the stuff that was happening, even though they weren't really surfers. They wrote about the culture all around them. So we did a concert here when we were doing Surf Beat. We did vocals and instrumentals. So there were 3 vocals we were going to do on the album. One was the Monster Mash. You remember the Monster Mash? Yeah. And I said, let me write some surf lyrics to that. So I wrote that. I was working on my surfboard in the garage one night when some hodads came by and we began to fight. So I hit them with my board and they were floored, and by the skate of my surfboard they were brutally gored. We did the mash. And the other one was Sweet Little 16 by Chuck Berry. And we performed that, and we did another song was called Sheila, Sweet Little Sheila, you know, I see you. So I wrote surf lyrics, and we tried them out at like November when we were playing the Biltmore, like 61, 60, something like that. And then we didn't do the vocals on the album, we just did all instrumental. But then this is like November, and then in February, Brian got this idea, let's take that Sweet Little 16, and he wrote surf lyrics to it, and that became Surfing USA. So that's kind of, they're really rocking in Boston, Philadelphia, PA, all over La Jolla, Waimea Bay, Surfing USA, Sweet Little 16. So Was that your question?
Yes, that was part of the question. And was every one of the challengers a surfer, and the Beach Boys were less surfers? I wasn't aware of that.
Well, I definitely, the ocean was, we growing up here, your parents would drop you off at the beach. I'd go out on a half-day boat off the Redondo Pier fishing, or Torrance Beach or something. The ocean was your babysitter, and your parents knew that you were safe, and at the end of the day, you could call your mom and she'd pick you up and you were exhausted. What more can parents want?
Right. Yeah. Well, I have 3 daughters who row, so that's my goal. Keep them fully exhausted all the time. And did you also visit? I mean, you spent a lot of time with the Lighthouse as a kid. What about the Insomniac?
Oh yeah. Oh, but I should mention that there's a new thing for your iPhone, and it's a tour of Hermosa here. It's called Experience GPS Tours, and it's a great fun. You download from your app store Experience GPS Tours. And you have like a 70-minute, mile-and-a-half walk around Hermosa, and you have the Insomniac and the Lighthouse.
Right.
And the story that they liked for mine was, when I was too young, you had the Lighthouse, but I was too young to go in the front. So they had a Chinese cook. So you could enter the kitchen from the alley, and he had like 2 stools and a little counter. And for $1 you could get, fried rice or wonton soup. And there was a girl that I really liked that worked at Catalina Music, and so I took her there for a date, and you could hear these great jazz artists from the back, and you didn't have to be an adult, you didn't have to drink, you didn't have to do anything. It was just like, so that's in the Experience GPS Tours.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So Lighthouse, and then across the street, all of a sudden you had this whole City Lights, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, San Francisco beatnik culture move in called the Insomniac. And they'd have the first time I ever heard a steel band was coming out of the Insomniac, and you go, what is that sound? And that brought a whole other culture into Hermosa for us kids, and it was like free. You could stand outside and listen to it, It was just, Insomniac was great, the Biltmore was fun, and downstairs in the Biltmore swimming pool, there was a guy that owned Mel's Aqua Shop in Hollywood Riviera, and he was selling aqua lungs and teaching you how to scuba dive get certified in their Hilton swimming pool. Well, he went later and started looking for gold in the rivers and stuff, and then he moved to Florida looking for sunken treasure, and Mel Fisher found the largest treasure ship ever, the Atoche treasure, which was several $100 million worth of stuff. But right here from this town, was that what your question was?
Yeah. A lot of people have, you can hear about the history of the Lighthouse, and you can actually walk in there and see it.
Yeah.
And I think the history of the Insomniac is a little bit hidden because my understanding from some of the mayors at the time was that the city wanted the Insomniac gone.
Yeah.
And not only did they get it closed, but they then bulldozed the building, and it's now air. It's a walkway. Right. So, and we've had people that we really want this out of here, so it's closed and all the walls are gone.
Yeah.
Right. And it's now the pathway between the pier going to the parking lot.
Boy, they didn't know what they did they?
It's just it's a crime to think about. I mean, we've had people come in here and say, yeah, I used to go by there when I was a kid, and my mom said, when you ride your bike by the Insomniac, you just keep going and you don't stop and you don't look at those people. And it's kind of charming to think of the kind of beat culture as being something dangerous.
Yeah, it was so powerful. A friend of mine I met who moved from Lakewood to Palos Verdes, he was 9th grader at Greaser, and new kid, and I said, man, will you teach me how to toe shine shoes? That's spit shine shoes. He had pulled his hair back with LB pomade, pulled it into a waterfall, and had khaki pants, slit, metal flake shirt, and he looked at me and goes, what do you do for me, man? I had to trade for the secret SA Vato Mojo. What do I'll teach you how to surf. He goes, okay. So he taught me how to toe shine shoes, and I taught him how to surf. And then I wanted to get him his own surfboard, so I took him to Bing's shop on the Strand, and we did he was an artist. We did a pastel mural on Bing's wall and asked Bing for a deal, and Bing said no. So I marched him right up the street here to Pier Avenue to Greg Knoll's shop, and I hustled Greg. And I did a price list and got a board, and his name is Rick Griffin. Oh, if you know that name. And we did a lot of stuff. I hustled Greg for a lot of stuff over the years. Then there was no high school in PV, so we were going to Narbonne High School, and John Severson showed one of his movies, Surf Fever, at school. Any kid would pay 50 cents to get out of class and watch a surf movie, right? So afterwards, I took down a 3-ring binder notebook of a story we were working on and showed it to Severson, and he sort of liked it, and about a year later, he started this magazine called Surfer Magazine. And he asked Rick to redraw the adventures of Murphy in the surf contest. And so surfers probably know Murphy, it's a great character. Well, anyway, cut to the chase a little bit more, we're having success as a band in a year or two, and we are playing San Francisco, and I sensed something was going on there, so when I got back, I loaded Griffin into my 56 VW and drove him up to San Francisco and introduced him to Wes Wilson, who was the first poster artist up there, and then Rick later moved up there and became one of the big 5 poster artists. He did the logo for Rolling Stone magazine. He did the Grateful Dead cover, Aowaxo, Moaxawa, and a lot of Grateful Dead covers, a lot of San Francisco posters, Hendrix with the eyeball and that kind of stuff. So, what was the question?
That was more than enough. That's fantastic. Yeah, the question is just, your life is so interesting. Why can my life not be as interesting as your life? That's the question. I just want to hear all your stories.
One thing is that you know, people start wondering. Okay, we're talking about surf music and jazz, and you know, and then me, I surface up in that old punk rock stuff. But back when I was about 65, when I was learning to play guitar, I was taking these lessons from a guitarist who just didn't really give me anything that I could work with. And after 6 months, I started going home, and I put on my record player, you know, one you open up and you just sit right next to it, and I loved surf music so much, I put on the Challenger's K39 album. And that was the first time I learned how to play anything, because I would just sit there with my guitar and just, rather than mess with chords, I learned what a bass line was. And I learned how to play a bass line from this guy's band.
That's how I got in the band. They didn't have a bass player.
Yeah.
You gotta be in the band. And they said, well, we got 2 guitar players.
Right.
But if you learn how to play bass guitar,
Yeah.
we can use you.
Yeah, and then from there, I figured, you know, I understood, this is the 1-5. And then started figuring out some other stuff, and to where I could play those rock and roll chords, and I was like, oh, now I know how to play guitar. And then got a set of drums. But, you know, but I always, something about surf music, you know, the instrumental thing, it just always reminded me of jazz. You know, my parents were big jazz fans, and they played jazz all the time at the house. And, you know, so we've both had this, you know, the Lighthouse being something that down here, that's where the jazz happens.
And it brought these world-class artists, you know, Miles Davis, Charlie Mingus, everybody that you think of in jazz would play the Lighthouse,
Right.
and you could hear them for free if you were a kid. And it had to have some sort of root, you know, this is a possibility. If you've never seen it, never heard it, you wouldn't know, but once it's there and it's like,
Sure.
it opens you up.
What I want to know is Gloria. Ozzie, you had Ozzie, and then there was Dez. And, you know, Dez, you know, was raised on jazz too, and then he got in, and then he went off into the rock and roll, you know, the curveball.
Right.
How did that happen?
It happened. That was it. You know, and but he had the jazz background. Yeah.
That was one of the great things I loved about Dez, was that,
Yeah.
you know, I sensed that in him, that he just wasn't a, you know,
It wasn't limited. Jazz is very open and expressive.
yeah, and he understood what it meant to have a beat sensibility,
Right.
and he had great rhythm in Black Flag.
Yeah. When my husband heard he was going to join, you know, a rock band or whatever, he said, "What are you doing?" And Mom said, "Do what you want to do." You know, and they traveled all over, and but he had a good background.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's important.
Is Dez named after Paul Dez?
Yeah, how'd you know? Yeah.
Someone said.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah,
you and
I did.
Ozzie knew Paul Desmond? and
Oh,
was a friend
definitely,
and,
yeah. Yeah, when Paul didn't have any work at all, and we got him some work here. Oh, yeah.
There were just a few clubs in the whole United States where jazz musicians could work.
Yeah.
And the Lighthouse
Was one.
that managed to survive over the decades.
Oh,
And you
yeah.
could work there and make money, and as a musician, you need that.
Yeah.
Casual gigs.
Now, did Ozzie eventually warm up to Dez being in a punk band, or how long was his
Yeah,
initial resistance?
My husband, a little bit, but I said, do what you wanna do. As long as you keep yourself healthy and you love what you're doing, and that's it. That's it, but he had a good background, you know.
Yeah.
But my husband said, well, what are you doing?
And-
Mom knows better.
Right. Did you guys have a sense that Black Flag was not a typical? I mean, I would say amongst the punk bands in that era, they were, you know, a very well known.
Oh, yeah.
Their music was better. They were more popular.
Oh, yeah.
They toured a lot. They worked harder. They recorded a lot. Did you guys have that sense of kind of how they fit in the overall world of punk music? Or
My husband, yeah, he said, you know, and most of those guys, they were good musicians, but they never had money, they had nothing to eat. My husband used to say, can we feed them? Can we let them sleep in the living room? Where I said, yeah, go ahead. But you know what, they never forgot it.
right?
Yeah.
That's the classic musician's joke, is a guy with $5,000 worth of equipment loads it into a $500 car to play a $20 job.
That's it. You got it.
I love it.
Well,
You know-
we used to, or it really was Greg and Chuck would encourage Mike Watt to ask Ozzie to produce a Minutemen record.
Oh, yeah.
And that made Mike really nervous and embarrassed, and he never would call.
Oh.
Dez would tell him, call,
Sure.
but that never got done.
No, you know, one of the biggest lessons I learned in recording, I learned from Ozzie.
Yeah.
There was, back in the 70s, 76, 77,
Uh-huh.
there was, what was it, the Hennessy's. And every Sunday, the Bobby White Jazz Band
Exactly.
would play there in the afternoons. And that was kind of like the Sunday watering hole for skaters and whatever. You know, we go in on their skates and drink and listen to the band. Well, they, at one point, Ozzie was recording a live album of theirs on a 4-track. You know, he said he needed to borrow some piece of equipment from our studio.
Yeah.
So here, we got this, you know. And I went down and watched it, and I was like, this is before I got involved in punk rock, but I was, you know, getting good at recording and thinking, oh yeah, I'm learning how to do this, and oh, make it feel really good, yeah, reverb, blah, blah, blah. And I offered to Ozzie, hey, mind if I mix it for you? And he said, well, sure, go ahead. Handed me the tape and got the machine in there. And I set it up one night. The band was there, and I was like, I was so taken with myself that like, oh yeah, I can do this. You know, I can get all this stuff set up. And as I worked on it and worked on it and worked on it, I wasn't getting anywhere. The band was like, and finally I made some mixes that when Ozzie comes up the next day, he said, well, let's hear what you got. So I played it, and he said, you missed it by a mile. Let me have this thing. I appreciate you putting the effort into this, but you know, he told me this is wrong, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong. And basically, what I learned from the guy was don't mess with a good thing. You know, just get a good recording.
That's it.
And make it musical. Don't worry if it sounds perfect.
Yeah.
And that was like, it was one of the biggest lessons I ever learned from Mr. Cadena.
Yeah. He worked for Savoy, Blue Note, Prestige, Fantasy, and our own label, Choice Records.
Yeah, and also recorded at Van Gelder's in
Well, he was,
the
Van
studio.
Gelder Studios was the greatest, you know. He was very, the studio was clean and you couldn't go in there if you smoked pot or anything like that, you know, he'd throw you out. But, and everything was done there, yeah, which was good,
You said Choice was your own label,
yeah.
and that meant you were going to a pressing plant and arranging for distribution of everything.
Well, my husband, yeah, Choice Records, yeah.
He started his own record store here.
Yes,
Right.
yeah, we had one back east also, yeah.
That's where the Birkenstock thing is now, right?
Yeah.
Next to Barnacles. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Right.
I started working for a label called Tacoma Records. I don't know if you know it. It's a little folk label started by John Fahey and recorded Leo Kottke and stuff. And so in the '80s, I had a kind of a hiatus period after Janis Joplin died, and we did an album with a fellow named T-Bone Burnett. I don't know if you know that name.
Yeah.
And he did this, well, he's got more famous. He was in the Alpha Band then. And then he did like the soundtrack for Oh Brother, Where Art Thou by George Clooney. So he's a really great musician. So we had no money to do recordings. And so this goes right along with what you're doing in the jazz club. And so we did everything in a house with one microphone. And T-Bone said to all the other musicians, if you can't hear me singing, you're playing too loud. And what that meant was everybody had to listen to everybody else, because that's one of the great faults is drummers like to play drums, guitar players like to play guitar. Everybody's like pounding away and nobody's
Yeah,
listening.
sure.
But what T-Bone did is sort of the essence of, and what jazz is all those, they call it play music, because they're playing with each other. You'll play a guitar solo and then you'll play a drum solo, or you'll play a bass solo, and someone will else play a horn solo. And you listen, and every time you play it, it's different. So you're reacting off the other person's version. So the musicians that are listening to each other, those are the albums, the great albums like Why Jazz Work, because you couldn't overdub it. Our first album was done mono, and then they had a 2-track machine, so we did a stereo version of the same songs, because they sold, instead of $2.49, they sold for $3.49. But you had to do it all at once, and you had to listen to each other. Plus the fact that the jazz guys work 6 nights a week. And so you get your chops down, you really know your stuff, and you know what works in front of a live audience.
That's true.
And that's what worked with us. The songs that kids would dance to were the ones that we played. If kids weren't dancing, you were either playing the wrong song or you weren't playing it well enough. And so you learn from playing in clubs like the Lighthouse and places like that. You learn how to play music that worked.
That's it.
And record music by, anyway.
Yeah.
digress.
You get A+.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. So I have a meandering thought, having had random conversations with everyone here in the last days and weeks, and having seen the film that hopefully everyone's gonna watch after this, the Jazz v Punk.
It's a
Hermosa
great
Beach.
movie.
Great
You gotta
movie,
watch
and
it.
it looks at the thread between between the jazz music coming from the Lighthouse and the punk music, and tries to have a thesis. Is it connected, or are these two random things that just happen to have coexisted in a 1 square mile beach town? And thinking through some of the things that I've heard you guys say, I will throw out a few data points, and you guys, I'm just curious to know if you guys think these are in any way connected or if this is completely random, right? You talk about the Chico Hamilton being basically an elementary school, a professional, world-famous jazz musician, being effectively an elementary and middle school music instructor,
Yeah.
right? So you end up with kids that know how to play, probably at a level beyond what normal middle school trombone players would know. You have the Lighthouse there, and you take someone like Raymond Pettibone, who is a jazz aficionado, who gets into jazz, who then gets into music, who then turns on his brother Greg into music, who then starts Panic and Black Flag, and then a lot of the music scene flourishes around there. Presumably, Greg had some music skills, perhaps through the public schooling system here, that came back to these amazing Lighthouse musicians. So I'm just wondering, between Lighthouse education, Lighthouse love of jazz, and how the love of jazz became a love of music, which then infected people, and in just the right moment in 1976, it turned into punk music. If that's all kind of the same fertile pool, the primordial ooze of Hermosa Beach that turned in from jazz to punk music. Do you think those things are connected?
Oh, well, of course. I mean, I know that, I grew up on, oh gosh, with me it was like hearing post-war radio broadcasts of big bands, off of a tube radio, and that was, I'd go to bed to that. That would be the last thing my parents would let me, experience, is something like, whoa, wow, and in the late 50s and going in, I don't know, I guess I didn't really turn on to the first era of rock and roll so much. Didn't really know much about Elvis. It was just a name that I knew, but it was like in the early 60s where suddenly all this pop music didn't really have a name other than they called it rock and roll, and it was just all kinds of stuff. And one of the things that you'd hear, Take Five, that was a hit, and then Louis Armstrong put out his Hello Dolly, and I knew who Louis Armstrong was because my parents used to play that. So I said, "Hey, this is cool. He knocked the Beatles off the mountain, man. Cool." But there was so much stuff that was not categorized, and I didn't care if it was country. I thought Johnny Cash was great, but there was a connection for me where I just didn't look at anything as one thing or another thing or another thing, but that jazz that I used to listen to my parents listen to all the time was one thing that really worked down on the ground floor of everything that I got involved with.
Jazz is possibilities, and the fun part about jazz is you're playing maybe a song you played a million times, you love it, and then you play something different by mistake, or just it comes out. It's like a writer writing something you've never heard before, and you're just playing it, and you go, wow, that's the jizz. That's where the word jazz comes from. It's something. Jizz. It's something. Yeah, don't tell my mom.
Is that true?
Yeah, but you can't say that. But speaking about that, so let's go to 1963. You want to hear Chuck Berry's story?
Yay.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I think
So I washed cars and mowed lawns to get my bass, and joined the band. Showed up at the Torrance Armory and paid my $1 to get in, and stood in front of the guys in the band until they said, "Okay, plug in there." And then we recorded a song called Mr. Moto, and we had some success, and all of a sudden we're getting radio play, we're working places. So we end up at the Hollywood Palladium in Easter week for the KHA Teenage Fair Dance Festival, and we're backstage, and here's this guy, Chuck Berry, and I kind of, I knew the name, but I didn't know all the songs he'd written, and I was not a very good bass player, and he doesn't have a band. He's shortly got out of prison for being black, right? And he shows up there, and he needs a band, so the guitar players were pretty good, so they said they'd do it, the drummer said they'd do it, and I'm just like, I'm not that good, I don't know what to do. And I said, are the songs hard? He said, oh, they're not hard. And I said, will you turn around and tell me what key they're in before you start? Oh, I'll do that. And then some girl from a high school paper, I think she was a high school paper, she said, what do you think about the Beatles and the Rolling Stones recording your songs? And he goes, oh, I don't know who those English boys are, but I sure am glad they're doing my music. So the Beatles were not on Capitol yet. They were on VJ, the largest black-owned record label in America. So we go out there on the stage, and our two guitar players are afraid Chuck's going to blow up their amplifier. So up in the balcony is our friend Leo Fender, who'd been helping us build gear and stuff so we could fill these rooms. They used to have a 24-piece dance band, and we had to fill them with 5. And so they borrow one of Leo's new things, the Fender Showman amp, and we bring it down and we put it on the stage next to our riser. And Chuck plugs his guitar into it, and he hears his guitar, and he goes, turns around and blows his amplifier a kiss.
Wow.
And from that day until he passed away, his promoter's contract always said, the promoter must provide a Fender Showman amp. So I've told this story, people I think sort of glaze over, and then some of this fellow Dominic Priori who wrote a book called Riot on Sunset Strip. He said, I got a picture of you and Chuck at the Palladium that day, and he said, but it's not very good. And I said, well, what's the matter with it? He said, well, it's just you and Chuck. Oh, yeah, okay. So I had to buy the $32 book, and I looked at there I am, you know, there's me just having a... Anyway, so Chuck never turned around, never told me which key the songs were in.
Right.
But from the moment he took off, I never needed to know anything more. And we finished that set, and it was one of those jazz kind of epiphanies when you go, oh, that's what rock and roll is. And you just have those moments where another musician, which is what could happen at the Lighthouse, putting these people together, and all of a sudden, they lift you up. It's like they lift you up. Anyway, I put some of those pictures on Facebook. I found the photographer who had died 10 years before. He did KRLA Beat Magazine and Teen Beat Magazine, and had found his estate, and we found the negatives, and we restored some of those photos, so I put some of those on Facebook and stuff. And what a blast to see me as like a 16-year-old playing behind Chuck Berry, and the look on Chuck Berry's face is like he's never heard it. Can you imagine all those hit records, you know, Roll Over Beethoven, Good Golly, you know, all those songs that he wrote, and never hearing his guitar sound the way he wanted it to sound until that moment here at the Hollywood Palladium.
That was back in the days when an old Fender went up to 12.
I don't know if you're Facebook, if you are kind of a public figure or if you accept friends from everyone, but you have the most interesting content as a steady stream on your Facebook page of anyone, because it covers the kind of breadth of this.
Yes, had time to write it down.
I mean, it's amazing.
So, when you're experiencing it and doing it, it's not to say that I've stopped doing it, because there's like that PBS thing, and I worked on Neil Young's Earth album and stuff like that. So I'm still doing it, but there's actually time to settle in, and I better write this down, otherwise it's just all gone. And then finding the photos and finding people that say, well, I've got this photo, and somebody sends you an album cover from Japan that you've never seen before. And you go, wow, how cool is that?
It's fascinating.
Facebook is a wonderful medium for sharing. So I'm only allowed 5,000 friends, but you know, last month they told me I had 910,000 likes or something like that.
Wow.
So people
are you
get to
at
see it.
Are you at like 4,990 friends?
Yeah.
You're kind of at the threshold.
Every once in a while I have to go in and kill somebody.
Please don't do it.
I put you in there.
I know.
I won't
feel
tell you
very
who had
privileged
to
now.
die.
No, but thank you. So, Spot, I have a kind of a photographic question, since we're really here surrounded by your photography. And, you know, people sometimes, I mean, sitting in here for the last month and observing the citizenry of LA come in and enjoy your work. Some people come in on a mission from God looking for, you know, like, show me Greg Ginn in 1978, you know, recording whatever, right? I want to see early Black Flag. A lot of people come in and they love the roller skating, 70s culture, and, you know, people often don't think of those things as kind of two things. I kind of see, you know, Three's Company over here and, you know, the Minutemen over here, and the two are not naturally connected, and yet in your existence, they were very naturally and very fluidly connected. And I think it's so interesting, because I cannot imagine in that day there were many people like you who lived so fluidly between, you know, basically all of the cool stuff that was happening all at the same time, and what seemed to me, looking back, like kind of probably different factions and different camps at the beach. Is that true? And how did you kind of live in all of these worlds?
Well, it was just what I saw at the time that I saw it. You know, there would be some things that would work out in my life, and then there would be things that wouldn't work out in my life, and I always went for something that works out, something that gives me something to do. And you know, well, actually, one of the best things that ever happened to me after I got my first apartment and didn't really know anybody or know what to do, or, you know, I was just this nerd who, you know, just sitting around my apartment watching TV. And one of the best things that happened to me was the night that the television died. And I'm like, whoa, what am I gonna do now? And that night, after about 5 minutes of panic, I said, wait a minute. I've been collecting all these magazines that I haven't read. I've got some iced tea in the kitchen. Oh, okay. And I got these good headphones that I bought. So I turned on the old, I forgot what, one of the early FM rock stations, KPBC, when it was really good.
KPBC was in
Yeah.
the basement of the Pasadena Presbyterian Church.
They were
And
great.
I remember taking the Vault Records, our label, the son of the distributor that recorded the first Challengers album. We had these two English guys come over when the test pressing of their new album. So Stan Lurk, who did, Jack, his partner, ended up owning Prestige and Milestone and Fantasy Records. I got the guitar player to go to Pasadena to the basement of the Presbyterian Church, and he got the singer. So I got Jimmy Page, and he had Robert Plant. So that's just that kind of a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
You just never know. I like their album.
Yeah.
But that was that was the first FM
Yeah.
progressive station that would play album cuts.
And everything was so wide open then.
So wide
They weren't playing the hits. They were playing all the album cuts.
Great DJs, Don Hall.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that night I just like turned one on, put the headphones on, pulled out one of the magazines, got that iced tea, and I had a joint. And I smoked it and was listening and was like, this is fucking cool. And then I started going out and meeting people face to face at bars. Maybe not the best thing, but it was better than sitting around the house by myself, But no, just I opened up to anything and everything and realized that I can just let anything in that I want and keep anything out that I don't want, just walk away from it. And, there was such good music happening at that time. And yeah, my first skateboard was one of those, metal roller skate things pounded onto a 1x4. Mine was a little cheaper than yours, a 1x4. And, so, I was familiar with that, but when I got down to, after the music scene in Hollywood where I didn't work out for me. I had to go somewhere and ended up in Hermosa Beach. And at some point in there, with the next camera I got, there was all these roller skaters.
And look at all these great photos.
Yeah.
So captured in time.
So I just said, well, this is what's happening. I'm going to take pictures of this.
And some of these skaters are here tonight.
Yeah.
Some of the girls in the photos are
Yes.
And some of the guys we've had in, I don't know if Gene is here or not, but some of the, we've had the pleasure of having them come in the gallery the last month. And,
Yes, I was.
She was one of the roller skates, and so
Yes.
were you,
Nice.
right?
Yeah. Naomi and Sue Hall
And Julie's outside.
and Julie Lavin is outside somewhere, and I haven't seen these ladies in so long, and I'm
So buy the print and they'll sign it for
happy.
you.
So which ones are they?
There's
No.
Naomi and the.
You want pics?
Oh,
You're not in
I don't
this.
think
Are
Naomi's
you
in
in?
any of these photos, but Julie is in
Number 3, right?
She's
one
right
of
there.
the ones right there in the radio station.
She's the second girl.
Oh.
At K-Rock with Rodney
Oh.
being in her.
Yeah.
Which one are you next to Rodney? Are you?
Also, the one with the furry legs. These were actually leopard skin roller skates, but you can't tell in this photo. Here, it's like right out of the Deuce.
Good to see you.
Spot also wrote an article on me and took photos of me. I was on the cover of the Easy Reader back in the early 70s too.
My understanding of this photo, tell me if this is correct, is
Yeah.
that there was a guy that worked at Surf Hut who used to, after work, hang out with Rodney, and you guys basically
Oh,
said,
yeah.
let's go crash the studio while he's on
Yeah,
air.
yeah.
Everyone, bikinis, roller skates,
Yeah.
don't change
Literally-
clothes. We're
literally.
going
Yeah.
to K-Rock,
Yeah.
and we're gonna just
Yeah.
like bomb Rodney on air. Is that
He
true?
Yeah.
He didn't expect us.
We just loaded up and he was, yeah.
He seems
Full
pleased.
Rodney form, yeah.
Yeah.
Did we go there like all in Ray's car?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
loaded up in like Carmen Diaz and different cars. And then the following week, K-Rock came down and they had a beauty contest called something girls.
Pacific Coast roller skate.
Yeah. No, they had
Pacific roller skate competition.
Yeah.
or
So
something.
there was a whole how everything manifested from one moment to the next happened so suddenly down here in Hermosa Beach. Yeah.
I didn't want the beauty thing to happen. I thought, that's
Yeah.
too cheesy. Let's just skate and compete.
Yeah.
But those guys knew they had to get people in, and I
They
look
knew
back
it's
at
all,
it
yeah.
now. It was the right thing.
Yeah.
It was. Why not?
It's
It
normal,
worked.
it's healthy.
Yeah.
Guys like girls.
Yeah. Yeah.
Girls like guys.
And we didn't take these ladies for granted in any way, shape, or form. And they were out there skating. And, oh man, we were all skating vertical.
Right. In bathing suits with like maybe just knee pads on,
And
doing ramps.
slalom.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
slalom with no pads.
Yeah.
So why
Yeah.
It was just bikini. That was
You're
it.
still doing roller derby,
I
right?
play still.
And I still skate on the
skate.
Strand. I was on the Strand today. I was skating.
Oh gosh.
I just live 2 blocks down the street.
Oh.
I drove 3 hours to come down here to see the spot again.
Yeah.
Wow. But you're doing roller derby.
I play
Yeah.
derby. My name is Firecracker. And so, yes.
That's awesome.
I skate on the mountain paths because I don't have a Strand any longer. So I skate.
So you're going downhill.
I skate on I used to skate down Pier Avenue.
Yeah.
No gear. These were my brakes.
Yeah.
Right. That's awesome.
We all hurt ourselves plenty of times.
Plenty of times.
So why don't we open up to kind of Q&A now? I think you had a question, and we'll just, if you guys have a question, just raise your hand, and we'll. Were you? No, you have a question.
I got a question. Well,
Yes.
we were talking about music. You were talking about some music at the Palladium. Well, there's some pictures of some musical performances here in the South Bay, including the big picture over there with Black Flag playing at Pollywog Park, right? Spot, can you talk a little bit about that? Because maybe the contrast of the time there, right? That it's kind of an epic South Bay musical gig.
Yes. It changed my life too. It seems like every few years something comes along, changes my life. And within that, even in the middle, something changes my life. Like meeting Ozzie Cadena changed my life. Meeting Gloria this time has changed my life. Seeing these gals again is changing my life one more time. But you were asking about the Pollywog Park thing. Well, I had known, had gotten to be friends with those guys, and I was still skating and taking photos, and they told me about the Pollywog Park gig, and they said, you want to come? And I said, sure, I'll come. And I don't remember if I went in my car or went with one of them, but when I got down there, I had no idea what was really going to happen. I mean, I had sat in with the band once in the in the wormhole down on the Strand, playing bass. But I knew that there was something going on, and when they got up and played, I mean, just all hell broke loose. It was a Shakespearean moment.
Catharsis.
Did I say Shakespearean? It's okay.
I mean, it's cathartic.
It was, yes, it was, yeah, because it was, they got up and started tossing around all this aggression and whatever, and everyone was there to see them. They were going nuts and started throwing beer cans back and forth, and the families were out there. Oh my God, what is happening? And so they were afraid their kids were going to, I mean, they were, they were grabbing their kids and pulling them and saying, leave the cooler, let's get out of here. And, what is it, Rick had to, who was started the show. He had to stop there. And there's that great tape of him talking to the audience and you know, so he had to protect his job. But a few days later, I was talking to him at the Exihibit, and he said, I was doing the best to not laugh about this whole thing. It was hilarious. It was, I mean, Shakespearean is the only way I can do it.
Because it wasn't, there were the jazz music was able to kind of skate through Hermosa, right? I assume the musicians could kind of come in and do their gigs and split town. And also like the surf music, I mean, it's like a perfect fit. But like, right, the punk rock kind of went against the grain, right? Black Flag were effectively, right, run out of town, then they moved to Torrance, run out of town in Torrance, et cetera, et cetera. It was not the same.
I think that Sunday everyone was expecting it to be just someone playing hard rock, more like a band like Free or maybe Deep Purple or something, hard rock, Steppenwolf, whatever.
Didn't Dez say that they booked it as a Grateful Dead cover band?
Something like that.
Fleetwood Mac. Fleetwood Mac cover band.
Fleetwood Mac cover band, thank you.
But it didn't jive at that time. Now you come back a couple decades later, and there's like a mural. There's a 20-foot high mural. Yeah, and there's the other art pieces with commemorating the time.
Yeah.
But how does it? Was it really like that back then, or there's a little difference? Yeah.
Well, murals are murals and that, and I mean, the photos here are what it was. So I'm just going to say, if you have questions about that, ask me about that. But
Right, and then when the police are involved in that, there's the great photo over here where all the skaters are just hanging out with the cops.
Oh, yeah. Well,
right there.
There were some really cool cops in Hermosa back then, and there was one or two of them that saved me from getting hauled off to jail for various things that people said. This guy is a criminal. And one of the cops came, hey, that's Spot. You know this guy? And they let me go. So, yeah, I mean, but...
What is the photo in your book of the cop giving the girl a ticket on the skateboard? Is that a ticket for skateboarding?
Yes, for skateboarding in the street. It was in Redondo. Some guys had built a ramp.
Quarter
in
pipe.
Their driveway.
Yeah.
And the only way to get to that ramp, you had to come down the street, turn in the driveway, and get up the ramp. So you had to start at the end of the corner. And that cop came by one day when we were all out there, and her name's Lori. He was like, okay, you're skating in the street, I gotta write you up a ticket. She tried to keep him from writing it up, and he wrote it up. And he was the cop who came along when these cops, I was driving a friend's car that wasn't registered for an errand. And it was like, oh gosh, I'm in a lot of trouble. Because they pulled their guns on me and everything.
Wow.
Yeah. But then he just happened to come along on his motorcycle and said, that's Spot, isn't it? Isn't it? And they're like, yeah. So, yeah, he saved me from going to jail.
Yeah. Wow. Because you weren't skateboarding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of stolen car, which was okay.
Yeah.
Any other? Yeah.
So can you share with us a little bit about the beginnings of the Bel Airs? It's my understanding, like around '61, that was the beginning of surf music. You had Paul Johnson, Eddie Bertrand. What were you guys' influence? What were you thinking, and why did you call it surf music?
But it wasn't really called surf music. It was just dance music and instrumental stuff. Let's look at Mr. Moto. It's like a D chord and you make it into a minor and diminished, and then it went for a little while, and then Richard Delby said, well, here's this song called Hot Rod Lincoln, you know, they go diddle 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 diddle. Why don't you add that to it? And it sort of came together like that. And Richard Delby moved out from Connecticut, and he was the drummer and sort of the leader of the band, and Chad Stewart lived in Portuguese band, he was a sax player. Jimmy Roberts, I always kid Jimmy, we played the Balboa Island 25th anniversary parade this last June, and Jimmy said to me, he said, you know, I've been playing casuals for 58 years, and he's raised 5 kids and grandkids and all. Jimmy quit the band, performing live, to take a steady job playing in the ice skating rink on Western. So Jimmy, because it was 7 days a week, or 6 days a week, as opposed to weekends like us. So you're just kind of playing songs that you like to play together, and your friends like to dance to. So that's what it was, and it didn't really get called surf music until much later. Part of it was playing for the Palos Verdes Surf Club. Those were the guys that started that surf club. I have pictures of them here in Hermosa in 40s down here, and it was that surf, people liked the dance music we played, so they'd hire us to play that surf club dance music, surf music. And then surf beat came out, and it wasn't R&B, it wasn't jazz, it wasn't folk, it wasn't spoken word. And it's called surf beat. What do we call it? It sold like 200,000 copies, which is huge. So it's surf music, and that's the way it sort of came about. But it was something that was happening up and down the coast. We had groups in Morro Bay and other groups who were just playing instrumental, like Link Ray tunes, like Rumble, blam, 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 open, the first power chords of all time that led to heavy metal and all that stuff. It's just stuff you could figure it out, and it's because we were here and the name and what we did, that's how the term came about. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Wow.
I've been thinking about it for a while.
Yeah. Anybody else want to know about spending time with the Beatles in India? We've got a lot of territory. I'd like to know about sleeping at the floor in SST. That kind of, you know, I read Indra Naomi, which is a book that Joe wrote. It has copies for sale outside, and I asked Spot about that. I said, well, were you guys living in SST? Spot's like, yeah, we were living in it. What? Like, who was living there? Everybody. And then it's like one room. Yep, basically one room, and we were all living there. Like, that just sounds insane.
It was the storage place where they had tucked all of Greg's electronic stuff, and my stuff went in there when I moved down, because like I said, we were first in West Hollywood, but you tried to stay in Hollywood, and when you came back down, I figured you took that as a defeat, but it was great to have you in the office because it made things much quicker to get something mastered or dubbed or mixed. And Mugger built you a perch.
Did you guys mention my name?
Oh, no.
Oh, no? Not yet.
You stopped when you got my sir.
So anyway, Mugger built a thing that put Scott's bed up on the floor above the couch where Greg slept. And Henry walked in and he looked at all of this work that Mugger did for Spot, and he felt insulted because he was sleeping on the cement at that point. But eventually he had nicer digs than anybody. He had a girlfriend with a house. But we had one room with a bathroom, and
Girlfriend in the house. What was that?
yeah. And, so he didn't complain much, but
And Dez was living at home at the
Yeah,
time. I
Dez-
think that's the key. Is
Yeah.
basically be from Hermosa Beach, so you don't have to be. You can actually live at Mom's house still.
that was
Well,
Lawrence.
Yeah, but
Some people move into.
Greg was from Hermosa too, but he was right. He was living at SST. He didn't.
Right. Well, we were very broke at that time, so we often walked down to the Gins on 21st Street, I think it was, in Hermosa, and made a sandwich at the end of the day when it was, when we couldn't afford a Mexican food or whatever was around the neighborhood.
Rod's Chore Brewery.
Regis would bring in
Yeah.
the grilled cheese sandwich.
Mr. Ginn was very generous. He didn't make very good spaghetti, but his heart was in the right place. I was gonna mention the Fleetwood, which was in Redondo Beach, and was kind of a place where the early punk rock
Next to
gigs
Sweetwater.
sort of fought it out with the old hard rock culture that was around here, and it was out of business by the time I got down here. But Patti Smith played there, so they had some touring bands. But also, I know that the St. Vitus guys who went to Narbonne High and were on SST doing a kind of psychedelic early stoner rock is what people call it now. But they saw the Germs at Fleetwood, and you know, there were a lot of fights, I think, because the Germs were not part of the hard rock world of, you know, the beach guys, you know,
Yeah.
in, say, that mid-70s period when things were kind of dicey.
Right. At the spot, the photos you have of Darby, were those at the Fleetwood, or what
Yeah.
show was that? Those are at the Fleetwood. I don't know where they are, but if
So
you guys
you-
want to check them out later.
There's Darby sitting on the stage.
There's one there, and we have a few other ones online. That it's, I just think it's incredible. I think these are, you know, original photos from that era that you can hear at. Usually you see this on Facebook at some point, or, you know, copies of copies of copies of copies. So it's been a real pleasure for me as a fan, Spot, to get to kind of live amongst your work for a month and
Well,
just live amongst these originals. It's
Some of
been-
these shots are, you know, just shocking, like there's Dez and
Shocking.
Greg
Where's
and
that?
Robo.
Oh, there,
I
yeah.
mean, you know, how cool does Dez look?
I know. Oh, yeah.
Anyone have any other? Go through you. Any other?
I kind of have a question about like the current state of music in Hermosa Beach. We have so much music history here. As a person that didn't grow up here, you know, moving here, I think, oh, this is where all this stuff happened. But I think it's interesting. It seems like there's the history that is documented, and then there's the history that was really happening with all this stuff. And I feel like that's sort of happening now with like the current city council not wanting to go forward with the Hermosa Beach concerts on the beach and things like that. Does any of you have any thoughts on like the future of music in Hermosa, and you know how they maybe want to preserve what's happened but also keep it going?
Well, I can't really answer that because I really don't. Oh my God, you guys leaving?
Make friends with your council members. They're all people that are elected.
Sue Hall's in the house.
Okay.
You know, like you mentioned the mural. It's like the current city council seems to be doing a lot of stuff to squash live music and live performances of all kinds in the bars around Hermosa Beach, and yet you put up a mural. Why? You know.
I haven't even seen the mural, and it's one of those things I honestly don't really care about. I mean, I know what.
You don't care why?
Because it's somebody's idea of what maybe it was like if you paint it the right way.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, what I've got up there is stuff that really happened. And you know, there's so much stuff that really happened. There was the lighthouse and the
Hey, when we were here back then, no one liked us.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have a bunch of people that said, "Get the fuck out of here," right? So you're gonna, you know, it's like we lived in the church over there, and no one liked us.
But
right?
I don't use harsh words.
Oh, sorry.
But hello- no.
Sorry.
But hello, I feel what he feels.
But I have an opinion on this. Can I say something real quick? I feel like because we're honoring the old jazz, the punk scene from that era, even though y'all, weren't appreciated at that time, we're honoring it now. We're trying to acknowledge the fact that there was a moment in time that was significant, that meant something to a lot of fucking people. And even though we didn't realize, maybe people didn't realize it at the time, they realize it now. And it sucks that they didn't realize it then, but at least they're realizing it now. So to me, the current music scene needs to look at that. And that includes the city councilmen and the people that live here and all the people that are like, oh, down on live music and all that stuff. They need to look at that and say, this is a moment in time too. Look at our current climate in this world. The music that's gonna come out of right here and right now is gonna be significant. Bottom line, no doubt about
Yeah.
it. Maybe celebrating that.
Well, there's one other piece to that, though, as far as the current music scene. Last Saturday, there was a festival in Huntington Beach. Social Distortion, Suicidal Tendencies, right? A lot of the contemporaries at that. Yeah, who used to play in backyards, but they played on the beach in Huntington Beach. I think there was a 2-day affair, 18,000 people, no issues, right? You didn't see anything in the news. So arguably, why couldn't that happen here? Now I know English Beat, I think, played on the Pier this year. I don't know if anybody went.
They did.
So, but it would be, so that you don't sell yourself short. Why not have gigs here too? I mean, festivals.
So get to know your councilman.
The music is going to be from the youth, not a bunch of old people like me, okay? Not from Hermosa Beach.
I don't know, have you heard 1 Square Mile? It's pretty good.
Yeah, there you go.
It's pretty good.
All I can, okay.
This is a really gentrified area though now. You know how much real estate is.
Yeah.
Most of the kids that grow up in this, in this town are kids of privilege.
Yes.
They have very regulated and dictated lives. I wish Robert Hecker was here since he teaches them at the middle school right here.
But well, you see how he heard the film, and he had some interesting things to say
I
about
can't
that.
wait to see it.
Well, I just wanted to say to you that myself, having done what I've done, based on a lot of what Randy and Gloria have represented in that, I can't speak for the current music because I really don't know what current music is, even on a national level now. So, all I can say is I know what happened then. It was great. It could happen again. I don't know how to say how it should happen or how it will happen. I just hope it does happen. Something that no one expects to happen suddenly is, whoa, getting everyone's attention.
Yeah.
So I think I'm saying I'm with you on what you're feeling, and I just can't say, I just don't know the right thing to say, other than, I guess it was kind of like what Mike Watt says, start your own band, that idea still, whether it's a band or just a good way to sample stuff and put it out again, do it, just do it. And the more you can encourage people to do something that maybe they hadn't thought about, or someone said, oh, that's just not cool, that's where it's at.
I'm sure it's happening, because that's the way it worked with us. You come home from school, you just sit down and you pound it out on your thing. You're just doing this and you're doing that. And then you finally use up all that energy. That's that period of your growing up where the hormones are just going and you need a release. And you take it out and you just can't really stop it. And sometimes it appeals to a lot of people, and sometimes it's just you, sometimes it's your friends, but it'll find its way out. So it's going on now, you just can't really see it until it's sort of somebody acknowledges it or something happens. So it's going on, because there's just no doubt about it. Just like when punk came on, I'm a little bit older, so I'm going, yeah, I remember needing that kind of catharsis. I needed that. Yeah, you need to get it out. So it's going on, and it's just younger kids and stuff.
Well, I think the other part of the punk ethos was doing things yourself, right? It was existing outside of the normal structure. Well, we don't need the structure. We will do it ourselves. We will play our own music. We will record our own music. We will find a way to distribute our own music. And now because of the internet, that's never been easier. But look at everyone here on the stage has the punk ethos to this day. Spot wants to do a new book. I want to publish my own book. Joe wants to write books, he can publish his own book. You know, I want to open an art gallery, open an art gallery. You want to put a bunch of photos in the wall, do it, right? There's a really strong DIY ethos that I think existed in punk music in the 70s. I think it persists today, and it's, you know, because of the internet now, it's much easier to do stuff yourself than ever before. So I think there's still a strong undercurrent of that, you know, that I observe in the town.
Yeah, and one thing that I've gotten into, and I may have already talked about this, I don't remember, but a few months ago, I interviewed John Golden, one of the last existing mastering engineers out in Ventura. He's still doing it. And you know, it's a real niche industry now, but there's still a few guys doing it. And we talked for 5 hours about the state of, you know, how did all this stuff start off? You know, cutting stampers for records and creating vinyl and all that stuff. And I thought we were only going to talk an hour, but no, we talked 5 hours because he mastered a lot of the SST records that I did, and did one with another guy, Kevin Gray, who also, I mean, these guys are so full of information. And John sent me this video of John Mullen, who was the guy who brought the first tape recorder into the country. The Germans invented it, used it in World War II for propaganda. And he got it, and Bing Crosby said, "Oh, I'm in radio. I know what this can do for me. Here's some money, John. Make this happen." You know, Bing Crosby was very influential in making tape recording happen in the country that most of the music we're talking about right now is based on. I've got these interviews, I've got this thing, and I'm real interested in doing some kind of presentation somehow to people who are, they're growing up in the digital world, and you don't know much about analog. That's valuable information, and it's so cool. I don't know which way I'm going to go with it, but I want to start turning people on. Here's the information. Check this out. Take it and run with it, you know? So that's one thing I really want to do. And you know, hopefully you'll be there maybe to see some of it and experience some of it, and you know, bring your friends, and yeah.
So we're gonna do the movie at 9:30. It's around 9-ish now, right? Time for probably one more question or so, if anyone has one.
I have one, but it's drug related.
Go ahead. This is California, and yes.
So you guys said SST a lot, which made me think of LSD. And I talked to several people during this era, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I did acid all the time, and Hermosa just like wasn't so nice." So like, is it true that Hermosa was kind of a town for druggies?
When's the last time you did acid?
Careful, it's her dad.
That would be never. Yeah, that would be never. But I'm unaware. So I don't know who's the best seated to answer. It's an interesting question.
Time to scale. I'm from Long Beach, so you know.
I'm not sure. I would guess that Hermosa is perhaps no different than any other town in that regard. I don't know, Spot. Your tome about this, you talked about it being I think the underdog town. I'm just curious if you know if was Hermosa any different than anywhere else in that era, or was that just the era?
I'd probably say not really.
That was for those on drugs.
Too much different. Not really too much different, you know. I mean, I'm not gonna, you know, I was never a druggie, but I'm not gonna say that I never did drugs. You know, I smoked pot. I even sold the stuff.
Did you inhale?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you gotta inhale. Come on.
Bill Clinton didn't inhale.
I've never done any needles or anything like that, but I have done LSD, and the LSD I've done was in Hermosa.
Well, there you go. Sold.
Yeah, I was. There would be some nights when I would go out and skate on acid, and I had to run a whole recording session on it one night that I didn't think I had to run. That was exciting.
Do you remember what band that was or what album that was?
No, it was some. No, this was a media art. I forget. Well, I had a hit of acid. I took it, and then about half an hour after I took it, I remembered. Oh no, I got to run a session tonight. I totally forgot about that.
So you want an insomniac story about LSD?
Yeah,
I would love one.
So I remember a friend of mine that I grew up with, George Lacey. His mom was Adele Davis. Adele Davis was one of the first great nutritionists. She wrote Vitality Through Planned Nutrition, Let's Eat Right to Keep Fit, writing in the 40s and the 50s. And she was one of those group of people with the Bertrand Russell and Aldous Huxley who participated in the UCLA program where it was legal and they were testing it out to see what it did. Well, George was a sandwich, her son made sandwiches at the Insomniac, so this is how we tie it together. And I remember at some point I was going off to go to India and I had this stuff called Familia and I wanted to be able to go off into the middle of nowhere. And I ended up going to Mesopotamia and into Tibet and all these, was Mother Teresa for 2 weeks in Calcutta. I said, I want to have this food that I just add water to and I can live. And so she said, I brought her the recipe and she lived in Palos Verdes. And she looked at my recipe and then she went out to the garage and had these big cardboard drums of calcium and magnesium and stuff. Dumped a bunch of that in my bag that I was going to carry with me on my backpack around the world. And then she said, you know, can you get me some LSD? And I said, this is my friend's mom, you know. I'm going, I don't know why people would ask me that. I'm a designated driver for life. And so I said, well, why do you want to do that? And she said, well, I was in this UCLA program where it was legal and it was just the most wonderful thing. We'd take it and then we'd have this like really soft couch and we'd put blinders on and listen to music while it was taking effect. And I said, well, what music did you listen to? And she said, Montevani. I thought, I'm not getting LSD. Meanwhile, George is making sandwiches at the Insomniac.
Right.
But anyway, that was just but anyway, we've all known people, we've lost friends. I mean, I was working with Janis Joplin on her last album, and then it was like, well, what could you do? And it was like a train going by at 60 miles an hour. If you want to stop the train, you put your hand out, you're going to lose your arm. You're just sort of like, there's not much you can do. And always in groups there are people that never do any drugs, that don't need drugs, that don't feel the need to do it. And then there are the people that do it once and then their life is over and they ruin their families and everything else. So I don't think any of that is, you know, what happens to you, it's your unique thing. I wouldn't say you had to, although jazz had sort of a commitment of, in that 40s and 50s, a lot of those guys did heroin. It was part of the jazz commitment. And then there's the alcohol music, and then there's the pot music, and then there's the Grateful Dead acid music. There's all kinds of music that are associated with drugs, but I don't think you ever had to do it to make it.
Right.
You know, I'm just throwing that out there. But
Yeah.
we got an Insomniac story, didn't we?
I love it. Well, so I want to give a round of applause for everyone here. Thank you so much. This was awesome. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
Hey, and thank you for putting this on. It's right. It's a big investment to make all the prints and make the space happen. So
Yeah.
thank you. We gotta respect the Pacific Coast Gallery.
So the movie at 9:30, you guys can grab a beverage if you want, and then it's probably what, another 20 minutes or so.
We're ready now.
Yeah. So let's give everyone 20 minutes to mingle, and then you'll go down the stairs, 2 flights. The movie will be 2 flights down in the lower garage.
Yes, we have popcorn down there, but y'all got a drink up here. Oh, okay.
All right. Thank you.